Think about this. Right? We know that the customer's expecting an introduction. There'll be a questioning process. They need to make a recommendation. We also know that they'll give you an objection or two. You're going to close them and hopefully get some money at the end of it. Right? Now, I believe that selling is so predictable, it is technically possible to phone someone up and say, yo, look, it's me. Right? I'm going to give you an introduction. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to tell you what I think you ought to buy. You're going to give me an objection. I have been on training course. I know how to handle it. I will handle your objection. I will close you, and you're going to give me a check. That's the process. Now, think about this. What do we know about the sales process? Well, we know if you start your conversation and you elicit a positive from the customer, you're much more likely to elicit a positive in terms of an end result. But we also know the flip is true. In other words, if you initiate the conversation and get negative responses, you're more likely to get a negative outcome. And again, you do this 1,000 times, you get consistent, replicable results. What else do we know? Well, we know that if you ask questions first, and then you tell them all about your product and service, you will end up with many more sales than if you start off asking them about what you do and then telling them about, well, what about you? Right? That doesn't work nearly so well. Questions, folks. The more questions you ask, the fewer objections you get. The flip is also true. Don't ask enough questions, you're going to get lots more objections. Right? So this sort of constant is there. Now, the idea behind this is that if we know so much about the sales process, we know customers don't like to feel they're being sold to. Right? You guys are all somebody's customer. If I ask you the question, when you go and buy something, if you walk into a shop, let's say, and the sales assistant comes up to you to try to sell you something, well, the natural reaction is to walk out the shop, cross the road, and buy it from somewhere else. Right? So we don't like to be sold things. We like to feel we are buying. So in this process, folks, if we know now that as a result of the recession, that customers particularly want to feel that they are buying and they're getting value and, all that happens is a good salesperson effectively disguises the end result. So we know the introduction still takes place. We know they still ask lots of questions. We know that the recommendation is based upon that need. We know you'll still get objections. If you close and the customer feels that they can say no at any time, they're much more likely to make that decision. Right? But the idea behind it is being able to understand that people think in patterns. And I guess for my last couple of minutes, what I'd like to do is try and show you how that will work. Okay? We can try a little experiment here. My next slide is a foregone conclusion. Right? I'm using PowerPoint, so I can't actually change the next slide without you seeing me do it. Right? So if you accept that my next slide is a foregone conclusion, what I'm going to try to do is see if I can influence the room into thinking what's on my next slide. Right? In case any of you are naive enough to believe that you are an individual and not a number, this is a good time to believe it. Okay? And the idea is I'm going to take the relatively unprecedented step for me of admitting to you what I'm about to do to you in advance of doing it. And despite warning you, it should still work. My next slide, folks, is a strange one. Okay? I haven't put like, what time is he going to finish, because you might be thinking that. I haven't put on there, what am I going to have for lunch, because you might be thinking that. But what I put on there is so strange and weird that even if you chose yellow or black as your color, right? Even if it's that weird, you still wouldn't be thinking it. So I'm going to try and see if I can get you to think the next slide, but do it in such a way that it feels like it's your decision to think it. Right? So paralleling the sales process, it's about giving the customer the feeling it's their decision to think it. All I'm going to ask you to do, folks, if you would, is to pick any number you like between 1 and 10. Okay? And the number you pick should feel like it's your number to choose. Right? Just in case any of you are more cynical than I gave you credit for, and you're thinking, he's probably already planted a number, I now give you a second choice. Stick or twist. In other words, stick with your original number, or change your mind now to any other number you like, between 1 and 10 inclusive. Okay. Assuming you've settled upon a number between 1 and 10, all I'm going to ask you to do is a little bit of maths for me. Okay? Take your number and multiply it by, no, let's make it hard. Multiply it by 9. Right? And some of you are thinking, drat, if only I'd chosen 1, it would have been so much easier. It's a bit of prediction there, right? Okay. So, I'm making two assumptions. Assumption number 1, you've all done it. Assumption number 2, you've all done it correctly. Assuming you've all done it, most of you will have a 2-digit answer. Not all of you, but most of you. If you are one of the people with a 2-digit answer, add your 2 digits together. So if you've got 21, it's 2 plus 1, it's 3. Okay? So now everybody should have a single-digit number as your answer. Let's subtract 5. Take away 5 from your number. Okay? All right. The good news is the maths is finished. Right? The number you now have got left is an important number because it corresponds to the letter from the alphabet. So if you've got 1, it's an A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and so on. Right? So match your number up to that letter. Starting with that letter of the alphabet, I'd like you to think of any country in the world and take the second letter from that country and think only of the second letter of that country. Starting with that second letter of that country, I would now like you to think about a very large grey animal. Right? I am rather hoping many of you are thinking this. Right? Quick show of hands, how many were out of interest? Okay, still better than chance alone, thank you. Folks, I'm going to explain how I did this very quickly, but just a very quick question. During I'm not saying you had lots, but did you feel like you had some choice? Yeah? Well, the interesting thing is whatever number you chose, whether you changed your mind or not, if you do the maths correctly, will always give you 4. Right? 4 is always the letter D. If you did not end up with 4, it was a maths problem. Right? Assuming you did end up with 4, then that's when you had your first genuine free choice. I said any country in the world beginning with D. And the problem is Denmark pops into your head. Well, you could have thought of Dubai, Dominican Republic, Djibouti, but most people don't. And because the second letter of Denmark is an E, the next really tricky question is a very large grey animal beginning with E. You think, well, that's a hard one. Elephant, bing. But again, you could have thought of elk or eagle or emu, but most people don't. So the way this works is how most people think most of the time, given or in a given situation. The sales process, folks, is not so different. It's about how most of your customers will think most of the time in a given situation. Right? So I suppose, just being very conscious of time, we know that as a result of this last recession, buying habits have changed and probably will continue to change as we move away from that sort of solid circle all the way across to that sort of more open 3 circles, right the way across, hopefully, to a boom. We know that their expectations have increased. We know they want more for less. We know they have to demonstrate value. Yeah? Remember, they are being, in some cases, being bullied by the accountant types into proving it, justifying every pound that they spend. And we know that we're in a sort of increasingly competitive market where things, very basic things like good customer service is really not good enough anymore. That's got to become the norm. So I guess one of the things we need to think about in terms of future strategies is how we can build a base to make sure that we're aware of the changes around us, we can respond to the client's immediacy, and we can do something to ensure that we deliver something a little bit better than everybody else is. Don't forget and don't lose sight of the fact that you are all somebody's customer. Your personal expectations have changed. You will want more for less, and you'll want it yesterday, but you won't want to pay for it until tomorrow. Right? And I think, folks, that's almost sort of the summary of the way things are. Your customers do want more. They expect more. That's the start point. And they expect you to deliver it. Folks, if you have any questions or want more information, this presentation will be available online. It's on the Confex website. But thank you very much for your time and attention, and I hope you found that useful. Food for thought. Thank you.